Welcome to the Artistry of Code podcast, where we, together with our guests, are seeking ways of doing things right and having fun with it.
Software, architecture, soft skills, teamwork, and other crazy buzzwords.
Are you ready? Let's bring more value to the business. Hello and welcome to the third episode. Your hosts today are
Grzegorz Godlewski,
Marek Urbanowicz,
and Artur Wolny. Imagine the day when you're allowed to decide what the team will do in the next sprint, regardless of cost. What would you do? Deliver another feature, fix a bunch of bugs, or maybe pay some technical debt? I bet most of us developers will choose the last one. That kind of developer's day doesn't happen often, so let's come down to earth. In this episode, we'll tell you how the legacy code can be improved in real life. We also wanted to thank all of you for the feedback we're getting, either via private messages or ratings on the podcast platforms. It's really encouraging and definitely keeps us going. Before we go on to that noble conversation, let's do a little warm-up by sharing some news from the last 2 weeks. Grzegorz, would you like to do the honors?
Yeah, definitely. So I start off with some bad news. Actually, you guys know it already, but our listeners don't. So as you probably recall from the previous episodes, I was doing a submission for the Boiling Frogs conference. Unfortunately, my subject didn't make it to the agenda. So when I've checked the lineup for this edition of the conference, well, there were very huge names there, and also some really good subjects. So I've bought my ticket for March 19th, and I'm still going to attend there as a listener. Although when I got the information back after the submission, there wasn't the option to be on the plan B list, let's call it this way, in case any of the talks won't be happening. Then there's also always the possibility that my talk can still fit in there. So I'm just, on one hand, I'm having a ticket, and then on the other hand, I'm still trying to have faith that this is going to happen. So that's the bad news. The kind of a good news, the highlight which I wanted to bring is a tweet from Kent Beck, which he made recently. He really made my day. The tweet stated, I made a big mistake when I called them iterations. I should have just said weeks. And then he goes further on the tweet. But yeah, apparently those people who were there at the beginning where the Agile Manifesto has been written for the first time, and they laid out all the foundations, some of the words started to live on their own, like the iterations. And I was too many times in those discussions, like how long the sprint should be, or how many iterations we should spend on something. And yeah, it's definitely something that could be rethinked back. So yeah, that's all what I've prepared. So I guess Marek.
So the last 2 weeks were mostly about the new series, which we just introduced a week ago, which we called Snippets. They are short episodes under 10 minutes. I luckily fit under that time frame. So yeah, that's the way how we express how much we want to talk to you. So we hope you will like it. If you have any feedback about it, please give us on either Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or any kind of feedback channel, let's say. So that's mostly it from my side, I believe. Artur, tell us something interesting.
Yeah, I want to start that it's such a pity, Grzegorz, that you won't present your topic, but probably we can use it. We can use it for good here in our podcast. My 2 weeks recently has been all around the code. So it was a good time for a developer, definitely. I learned a lot about the Node.JS framework, and that's something I wanted to emphasize. And this time I started to like this solution. Yeah, Marek presented it to us some time ago, but I didn't have much opportunities before to try it out, how well it is, if it's well or not well designed. And I must say that that it is something. It is something that brought my attention, and I am very satisfied with the time spent on that code base. It reminds me the time when I was working with PHP. Yeah, don't hate me for this.
No, it's nothing to hurt you about. I mean, I had the very same feeling. I mean,
Yeah,
the Node.js ecosystem actually lacked that sort of solution there, which is really speeding things up,
yeah,
like
yeah.
really speeding things up.
I wanted to remind the Zend framework, which was my favorite, but also the Symfony, for example. They were so mature solutions that, yeah, we were lacking in the Node.js community. Um, so all this dependency injection, all those concepts that are basically um, taken from Java, all those Java-based inspirations, in my opinion, work very well in the modern software engineering. So I am just very happy with that time, with those 2 weeks, and I am waiting for more because I haven't discovered everything yet regarding Nest.js.
Nest.js was also my first pick for my internal project, which I'm running, and I'm like really, really happy with it. So I think we all, as we sit here, we're going to send a lot of love to the Nest.js community because, and to the developers behind, to the authors. You guys did a very great job, and you're really changing people's lives. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I can clearly remind the time when I was trying to sell this solution to you guys, and I remember that Grzegorz was not really big fan from the beginning, but
Because you're always bringing new shiny things, and I always say it's too new. It doesn't have community support. I didn't heard about that, so we can't
yeah,
use this.
yeah, maybe I'm not great salesman, but I keep learning in this area. But today we want to sell again something. We want to sell some routines, maybe, and approaches. And so today we want to talk about the topic which can be pretty hard to fit under an hour or even 2 hours, but we will do our best here. And it's about the refactoring and how we are approaching this subject. What is the refactor on its own? So let's have some time and think about it and discuss this topic and share how we see the refactoring routine, let's say.
Okay, we will for sure cover all those topics, but first things first. Let's say, what is refactoring? For me, the process of refactoring is introducing change in some part of application in the source code that does not change the output of this source code, neither does it change the side effects. And the important part here is that the change that we are introducing needs to be beneficial for our product and the code base. Yeah, we need to make it better some way.
So on my end, refactoring means to me an effort which is aiming to reduce the technical debt, like in principle. So we can do it by restructuring the code in a way that is going to fit in a desired shape. So let's say we have a messy code base, and then we wanted to restructure this so it's going to make use of some design patterns, right? So we have this in mind, and then we're going to refactor the code so that it's fitting to that target picture. But the important part here is that we don't want to change the functionality or the observable behavior to the end client. So like other parts of the code, and definitely not to the end customer, right? So the changes shouldn't be strongly noticeable to the end users. So, Marek, what do you think?
I would say it's always hard to find that thin line when something is a refactor or it's becoming big change, really. And it always has to be done carefully because it may have unpredictable effects on our work and on the project. So I would say we have to be looking for the thin line between the refactor and changes, really.
Yeah, and to see this thin line, I think that for each refactoring part of our work, we should be prepared properly. So what do you guys think that we should remember of before we start?
I would say that I'm not always prepared for the refactor because I have this kind of approach where during the work, when I see some issues in the code, I can't stop myself from fixing some of them at least. Yeah, I'm well known at my current company for fixing typos. It's in the code, so it's not maybe refactoring, but it's still something around this subject. Yeah, so I definitely agree on being prepared for bigger refactors, but I like to do like quick ones on the spot if I see the opportunity.
I feel like to start a proper refactoring, I need to be prepared. At least I try to put some constraints on me and predict some expectations that I would like to achieve after the refactoring. And to do it safely, I also try to make sure that the environment that I am trying to change is safe for this kind of improvement. So, first of all, if it's covered with tests enough, if I have enough time to finish it, uh, and to deliver the story that I wanted to implement, and I just stumbled upon some problem in the code. So for me, it's a very important decision, and of course, it's not that like I am perfect. I also tend to fall too much for refactoring and finish up in some position that I neither could finish the story part nor the refactoring part, and it was very difficult to revert from this decision. This is why now I try to plan it each and every day.
Yeah, I think you touched a really important thing, which is being on the safe side. I have just one memory about it when some time ago I was trying to start some quick refactor but on fairly critical part of the code. And the first thing which I've done was to run the tests on this area and check the coverage. Yeah? And I remember when I've seen that coverage was like below 50% or something, I decided, okay, it's not safe to do the refactors there because I have nothing, I have no insurance there. It may end up really badly. Yes. So I basically created the ticket for the future. Let's say let's do something there, but yeah, not this time. It won't be quick and it won't be safe.
Yeah, it's like jumping on the test suite, like in TDD. Even when you have like some advices on working with legacy code and being on the safe side, I I always like did it this way whenever that was easily possible within time frames, and a lot of people do it this way. Is that you start with writing a test, and even if you can't easily write a test for a unit which you're modifying, then perhaps you can write a test for a bigger component, like an integration test, sometimes even a manual test, just to be on the safe side. But when it comes to the preparations, which you talked about, well, the important part really is to have the target picture in mind and where you want to get, because this way you will prevent a very fatal issue with refactoring, with random refactoring. So when I'm jumping into the code and then I'm trying to apply a refactoring which I know of, but it's missing the bigger context. So imagine a group of people randomly doing refactorings in the code. There's nothing good coming out of it. So especially when you're in a team, you really have to have this idea. And what's going to help in finding that picture, obviously that's knowledge of like design patterns, having some patterns for the system which you as a group, as a team would like to apply, and that's going to give you that target picture how to get there. Well, where to get. The being on the safe side, you guys explain this super clear. You have to have the test suite, and you really can't continue without this. But then again, there's one bit which I also find very important, is the knowledge of code smells. I mean, people have to have the knowledge of code smells so that they can detect issues in the code. And what comes along with knowledge of the code smells is also knowing the ways of how to deal with them. And once you know how to deal with them, you can safely apply the refactoring techniques, because there are some very good publications on this. That's the Working Effectively with Legacy Code of Michael Feathers. There's the very good webpage about refactoring called Refactoring Guru. They're going to show you all the code smells that they know of, the ways how to deal with them, and safe refactoring techniques. So for me, that's a basic preparation for working with refactoring in any kind of a system, right? So having the target picture, having the idea how to do it in a safe way, not only with having tests, but what kind of changes in the code can be done, so that after each and every commit, we can actually still have a working system. So that's the way I would recommend preparing for refactoring.
I have strong impression here that we have like two, maybe not two ways, but two sizes of refactoring showing up here. So we have like the small things and the bigger things. Yeah. So probably we have to approach them fairly differently. So definitely we need to do much more preparation for the bigger ones and bigger chunks of work here. But I would still try to vote to do to try to fix things on spot. Maybe not with it won't come with the preparation because you don't have the opportunity before, but I would give a credit to WebStorm here, for example, because when I'm working with WebStorm, I keep an eye on the yellow highlights there, which it gives about some code smells, as you mentioned, and other stuff which is potentially bad. It's not always really bad, but it may be bad. So I tend to, when I'm in some file editing the code, I will always, on the daily basis, I will try to look on this stuff for a few minutes maybe, and see if maybe something can be improved there, and even create like a few lines of MR just to give a bit of improvement there.
Yeah, the scout rule is definitely something that we should apply, right? So whenever we see a place which can be like maintained in terms of that means you have that code smell, right? So you saw it, and in that moment you wanted to introduce the change, and that's like super okay, definitely. The only problem which I was trying to like emphasize is that if people do it in an unsynchronized manner, right? So a lot of people doing it with their own idea. That can even increase the technical depth on a longer run, because then somebody will have to take that step back, right? So, guys, scout rule, definitely a way to go. Just be sure that so the whole team is moving into the same direction, and not everybody's going to a different one, because you're going to stretch it even more this way.
Yeah, do not replace all ifs with switch if your team don't agree on that. Yeah?
I feel that regardless if those changes are small or big, we need to always think if the circumstances of implementing changes are proper to do the refactoring. For example, I wouldn't decide to do any refactoring, even the small one, when I know that I am in hurry, and I am developing under high pressure, that I need to deliver some very important business goal that has some deadline, then I wouldn't decide to start on a refactoring, even though I could see that there is some code smell uh, that in other circumstances I would try to fix. So, guys, what you think we should not do during the refactoring process?
So first of all, I think you shouldn't spend there too much time. I mean, we all are developers. We all love code, and we all love to tinker with code. And if you're like us, when we would like to even tinker with the messy code, sometimes it brings even more fun to try to fix those things, and you can really get lost in the fun, so to speak. So in order to avoid this, I'm frequently setting myself some constraints. You guys mentioned about that. To be to be like explicit, I'm setting a timer for like 15 minutes, half an hour, or 1 hour, depending on what I would like to do, and the clock is ticking. So I'm giving myself that portion of time, a time box, in which I'm trying to achieve a particular thing via refactoring. And if I obviously I have to do a lot of commits in between, just in case that when the timer starts to ring, then I'm finishing this off at the point where the time has rung, right? So I this way I'm having some changes introduced, but I'm not spending too much time in there, right? So yeah, keep it under control, because otherwise this may affect the delivery of your feature, right?
I remember that when we were introducing TypeScript, when working together, because I consider introducing TypeScript as some kind of refactoring, because we have the same output but with a different code base. I remember that we could be easily swallowed by the changes. Yeah, we could like create a snowball effect by changing one type and trying to, okay, let's grab another one because it is one missing. Yeah, and I remember it was very tempting to finish up this file totally, like to leave everything typed, no undefined, no any, etc. But when we decided to take this another one, it's like created another series of changes that needs to be introduced to finish up the process. Yeah, so I think that we should always remember about the goal of change. Just like you said, just put some constraints on what we do. And mountain climbers used to say that reaching the peak of mountains is less important, but the process of doing it is what really counts. And I think that this statement is actually not the best in our positions as a developer because we can get lost on the way to the peak.
Yeah, I would just like to agree with you guys that it's so important to know where and when say stop when we are doing the refactors, because it's really tempting, as Artur said, to do one or two more steps. But we always have to keep in mind about the delivery and to keep the product in good shape and stick to the roadmap of the team instead of creating our own roadmap on the side.
Yeah, so when it comes to the things which shouldn't be done during refactoring, I stated this and called this randomness. Frequently, especially in legacy code bases, which have a lot of years of like history, you can easily end up in a situation like with the analogy of the old sweater. You're having that little thread, you're trying to pull that little thread out, and the whole thing falls apart. And in tangled code, that's very same. So you really have to watch out before you start, and pick the thread carefully, because it might be the case that you can do the whole thing starting from a different point, but not necessarily the one which is most itchy when you look at it, right? So, first of all, this requires the understanding of the code which you see there. You need to see how the thread is going through the code base so that you're going to pull the right one. If you're going to pull the wrong one, and we all have been there at some point, you just wanted to add a TypeScript type to that JavaScript code base, and then it starts. It looks like the inheritance structure in the code is done in a way that's super counterintuitive, and now you have to restructure a lot of the classes in a way that TypeScript is going to handle this gracefully, etc. So yeah, pick the starting point wise. Don't do it at random, and always kind of try to assess the situation before you attempt, which is not always like easy, right? So, and the other thing is, you guys also stated this, but I would just repeat this once again and emphasize: you really shouldn't refactor if you don't have tests. Especially if you're having an application which is running in production, it's transferring money, it's bringing money to the business. I wouldn't recommend of doing refactorings if you don't have at least a single test there, which is going to verify that you didn't break the core paths for the system.
I would also bring one thing which would stop you from doing any kind of even a bit bigger refactor, which is the approval from the business, which recalls the thing which was said in the TypeScript snippet, let's say. And yeah, I would say it's so important to when we recognize some area which has to be refactored, we have always to go to the business, agree that with the project management, product owner, whatever is the setup at our company, because it has to align somehow with the business priorities there.
So here, kind of saying that the refactoring should be a dedicated effort that should be brought transparent. This is what you think?
I will not say that I always create a ticket for refactoring, because I would be lying. So yeah, for small ones, I won't do that. Probably if it's the quick one, which can fit, as you mentioned, like some quick timer setting. But any sort of bigger refactor, I believe it should be done in the transparent way in the team and in the company.
I have a feeling that we as developers are expected to create the best code that we can. So it is our responsibility to provide it
Within the time we have, the best code we can within the time we have.
exactly. So we need to count it, but I want to say that we shouldn't go rogue, let's say, and fix everything when we only spot it. It doesn't really matter how we do it. If it's like a big ticket separated from the feature that we are delivering, or it's included in the things we do. I think the main idea is to like set up some cooperation rules with our business representatives that we and they agreed what we can do, how much time we can spend on some refactoring process, how where is that line that separates what we can and what we can't do. Is the most important thing to keep our relationship healthy. So we should be just on this line, so both developers and the business who is actually paying for our time will be satisfied.
Yeah, so to sum it up at that point, there are some cases and situations in which having the refactoring captured as a dedicated effort, either in the plan for the sprint or generally in the plan for the projects, makes a lot of sense, right? So if the effort required is going to be very big, then we really have to make this transparent. This is going to make the negotiations very hard, probably. To get the money and time for it. Really, it's about getting the time for it. Mostly, money is the consequence of the time here. But then again, I'm also in the position, and I know that you guys will agree with me here, is that the refactoring thing should be considered also as a daily routine. We talked about that scout rule. We didn't talk about this, but it's also worth mentioning that, like in the past, we also dealt with the situation in a way that we somehow included the refactoring or the need for refactoring as part of the estimates which we provided for the backlog items, right? So essentially the refactoring part, the smaller bits, the easier ones, can be really part of the way of working which you have as a team, right? So you can promise yourself that we are going to deliver the code in a certain level of quality, and sometimes we'll have to refactor, and then we're going to include that in the estimates, right? And I believe most of the time everybody is totally okay with that. And this way you can perform the refactoring in an ongoing way, without the need of running into difficult conversations, where you really don't have to use the word refactoring anymore. You just go to the planning, you provide the estimates, you start the sprint, and then you know that you have some time included for the refactoring, timer, and go. So don't be afraid of doing this. Don't be afraid to talk about this, and be always transparent when there are bigger chunks to be refactored.
With all of that said, I believe maybe it's time for some closing thoughts.
So my closing thought for this episode is always strive to refactor. So primarily using the scout rule, and refactor in a predefined direction. So never in a random one. So just for the sake of having a refactoring itself, because you might accidentally add debt instead of paying it off. Especially when you're working on a team. Make sure that everyone's moving in the same direction and not the opposite.
My final thought about the refactoring will be the rephrase of the Police song, which will go like, every little thing you do can be magic. So don't be afraid and don't underestimate the value of small changes and small refactors in the code.
All I want to say to summarize this topic is, let's not be afraid of it. But when you do start some refactoring, let's do it wisely and keep honest about it, because those changes are not only for us, but for the whole product to be better, more stable, more performant. So everyone should be satisfied.
These were very good closing thoughts, guys. So we all hope that you're going to make good use of what you heard about refactoring from us today. Once again, we're keeping our fingers crossed for you guys on your refactoring journeys and efforts. Don't be afraid to do it. Do it in a mindful way. And always keep in mind the consequences of your action, especially for our beloved business. That's all what we've got for you this time. So take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's all for today. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Visit our page on Facebook and Twitter, leave us a comment under the episode, subscribe to the updates, and share it with others.
We would like to hear your feedback so that we can prepare more interesting content for you to enjoy. Hear you next time!